Okay, buckle up because today we're diving into the world of Palantir. And let me tell you, the research pile you sent over for this one, wow, it's like trying to solve a high stakes puzzle, except the pieces are made of algorithms and government contracts.
It's a fascinating puzzle for sure.
Right. There's this weird mix of, I don't know, almost like tech fan fiction mixed with some very real concerns about where they fit into the bigger picture. Some people are comparing them to SpaceX, saying they're going to revolutionize everything with AI.
Yeah.
But then you've got others saying, hold on, are they really about cutting edge tech or just, well, being really good at getting those government contracts?
What I find most intriguing is how Palantir seems to straddle this line between the hype we often hear from Silicon Valley and the realities of, well, geopolitics.
Yeah.
We hear about their AI capabilities, their ability to analyze data in ways no one else can. But then you dig a little deeper and you realize just how much of their business is tied to government contracts, particularly in defense.
Yeah, and that really jumped out at me too in the research. I mean, several articles pointed out that their growth seems to be directly correlated with the rise in U.S. defense spending. And it's not just the U.S. either, it's NATO allies too. It's almost like Palantir is on this.
Lifeline.
Yes, a lifeline connected to global defense budgets.
It's a key point to consider because when a company's fortunes are so closely tied to government spending, especially in a sector as unpredictable as defense, it makes you wonder about their long game. Now just look at this year, for example. U.S. defense spending has already blown past initial projections, which means companies like Palantir are reaping the benefits, at least for the time being.
But what are they actually selling? It's not like they're rolling out tanks or fighter jets, right? It's data analysis, but on a scale that's hard to wrap your head around.
Remember that $480 million Project Maven contract with the U.S. military? That single contract speaks volumes about their position in this niche. They're not just analyzing data. They're doing it with a level of depth and access that most tech companies can only dream of.
$480 million for one contract. Okay, see, that's what makes me wonder if the whole Palantir as an AI company narrative is, I don't know, maybe more marketing than substance? Because that's a Silicon Valley valuation, not your typical defense contract.
You've hit on a debate that's been raging within the tech world itself. Yes, they utilize AI and machine learning in some areas, like with their AI clinics, but their core strength seems to be more about high-powered data processing and algorithms, not some all-knowing AI making decisions.
So not quite the Steinet scenario some folks seem to imagine.
Not exactly, but here's where it's really interesting. What truly sets Palantir apart might not be the type of AI they use, but the sheer volume and sensitivity of the data they have access to. And where do they get that data?
You guessed it, those government contracts.
Exactly. They've got access to a level of data that most companies, even giants like Google or Amazon, can only dream of. Imagine if you took the Library of Congress, but instead of books, it was filled with real-time intelligence, classified reports, and enough data points to make your head spin. That's where Palantir plays.
Okay, but speaking of tech giants and those ambitious projects, what about those articles comparing Palantir to, of all things, SpaceX? Is that a valid comparison or just some attention-grabbing headline?
It's certainly a bold comparison, but there are some interesting parallels. Think about it. Both companies initially relied heavily on government contracts to fuel their growth. SpaceX had those early NASA deals to resupply the International Space Station. And, well, we've already established Palantir's, shall we say, close relationship with government agencies.
So it's like a two-step process. First, build a solid foundation with government support, then use that to launch into the commercial market.
Precisely. And that brings us to the billion-dollar question. Can Palantir really pull a SpaceX and make that leap from those government-funded projects to becoming a major commercial force?
Well, to understand that, we've got to factor in what I like to call the Peter Thiel effect. Because let's be real, his involvement adds a whole other layer to this story.
Ah, Peter Thiel. The man, the myth, the venture capitalist extraordinaire, and not one to shy away from expressing his, shall we say, strongly held beliefs.
And for those who haven't been following Thiel's every move, those beliefs tend to lean rightward, to put it mildly. So how does this all connect back to Palantir?
Well, it's no secret that Thiel's connections in U.S. political circles, especially during the previous administration, seem to have helped smooth the way for Palantir in securing some seriously lucrative government contracts.
Which, from a purely business perspective, is a brilliant move. But it also makes you think, did Palantir get a little too cozy with certain political players? And considering the type of power their technology has, does that make their influence a bit concerning?
That's a question worth pondering. Does this political dimension given Palantir's reach and capabilities, make you more or less comfortable with their role?
There's a lot to unpack there. But for a moment, let's shift gears and talk about the elephant in the room, Palantir's valuation. Some of the figures in these articles had my jaw on the floor. They're being compared to companies like Shopify, which, as we all remember, took investors on a bit of a roller coaster ride.
Palantir's financial story is just as captivating as their technology, that's for sure. With a price-to-sales ratio currently sitting at over 30x, they're valued much higher than your average software company.
Okay, for those of us who don't speak fluent Wall Street, what does a 30x price-to-sales ratio even mean? Is that a good thing? Bad thing? A sign of the apocalypse?
In the simplest terms, it means that investors are banking on some serious future growth from Palantir. But it also means they're priced for perfection. Any missteps, and that stock could take a tumble. Think of it like this. Imagine a bakery selling a loaf of bread for $30 when every other bakery is charging $1. That bread better be made with unicorn tears and sprinkled with gold dust to justify that price.
Unicorn hairs and gold dust. Okay, now that's an image. So are we saying Palantir's valuation is a ticking time bomb? Because my portfolio can only handle so much excitement?
It's too early to definitively say, but it definitely highlights the importance of looking beyond the hype and understanding the fundamentals. Is this sky-high valuation based on something concrete, or is it just pure speculation?
That's a good point. I mean, you can't just slap a fancy price tag on something and expect everyone to buy in, right? But we're not talking about bread here. We're talking about data analysis on a scale that most people can't even comprehend. So how does a company like Palantir, with its, well, let's say its history with government contracts, how do they pivot and become the next big thing in the commercial world?
That is the million-dollar question, isn't it? They've achieved this dominance by securing government contracts. But to really explode in the commercial sector, they need to convince businesses, startups, Fortune 500 companies, everyone in between, that what they're offering is worth the price tag.
Right, because convincing a government agency with, let's be honest, deep pockets and, national security concerns, it's a different game than convincing a CEO who's worried about quarterly earnings and keeping shareholders happy. So how are they approaching this whole commercial market thing? Are they actually making any progress?
They've had some wins, but it's been more of an uphill climb. Most of their clients in the commercial space right now are large enterprises, which makes rapid growth a challenge.
Okay, so not exactly the recipe for overnight success then.
Not quite. It's more like, and I think this aligns with your earlier analogy, it's like trying to sell a luxury yacht in a world of speedboats.
I like that. It paints a pretty clear picture. So not exactly smooth sailing in the commercial waters.
Not exactly. And the numbers seem to reflect that. Palantir's customer conversion rate in the commercial sector hovers around 10%, based on the latest reports.
10%. So for every 10 companies they talk to, only one actually signs a deal. That's pretty rough, especially for a company with this much hype behind it.
Well, it's a different type of sales cycle. Government contracts, as we've mentioned, they're long, they're complex, there's a lot of red tape. But the business world, especially for companies used to moving fast, being agile, it's a whole different ballgame.
So it's like they're used to playing chess, but now they've been thrown into a high-speed game of checkers. Same board, different pace.
And what's fascinating is that their experience with government contracts might actually be a hindrance in this environment. They're used to dealing with clients who have deep pockets, who prioritize security, who aren't as concerned about, say, speed or cost-effectiveness. But in the business world, margins are tighter, turnaround times are shorter, and there's this constant pressure to adapt, to innovate, to stay ahead of the curve. The question is, can Palantir adapt?
So it comes down to this. Can they bridge the gap between the world of government work, which is often slow and meticulous, and the fast-paced, constantly evolving demands of the commercial market?
Exactly. And it all circles back to their core identity. Are they a government contractor who dabbles in the commercial sector, or are they serious about becoming a major player in the business world? Their actions over the next few years will reveal a lot about their long-term strategy.
Speaking of revealing their strategy, let's circle back to those eyebrow-raising valuations for a moment. Investors seem to be optimistic about Palantir's future, but is it based on something real, on tangible results? Because even the most impressive unicorn bakery, to use our earlier analogy, still needs to prove they can actually, sell some bread.
You're absolutely right. A company can ride the wave of hype for a while, but eventually they need to back it up with real, demonstrable value. And in Palantir's case, their success hinges on a few key factors. Can they crack the code of commercial expansion? Can they convince investors that their technology is more than just a niche product, something that's useful beyond the realm of government contracts?
And something tells me there's another piece to this puzzle, right?
Exactly. And it's a big one. Can they do all of this while addressing the, shall we say, the ethical concerns that come with wielding this much data, this much analytical power?
Okay, now we're getting to the heart of the matter. It's not just about data or algorithms or even those government connections. It's about navigating this really complex intersection of technology, ethics, and public perception.
And it's about understanding that every technological advancement, and Palantir is a prime example of this, comes with its own set of risks and rewards. They've developed these incredible tools, but the question is, how will those tools be used? And how will they ensure they're used responsibly?
Those are some heavy questions, and I have to imagine they're only going to become more pressing as Palantir grows and evolves. So how do we even begin to grapple with these issues? What should we, as informed individuals, be paying attention to as this story unfolds?
It starts with asking the right questions. What safeguards are in place to prevent the misuse of their technology? How are they addressing concerns about bias in their algorithms, the potential for discriminatory outcomes, and perhaps most importantly, are they being transparent? Are they having open and honest conversations about the ethical implications of their work? And these are questions we should be asking not just about Palantir, but about any company with this level of data-driven influence.
It's about demanding accountability, right? Not just from the companies creating these technologies, but from ourselves as well, as consumers, as citizens, as participants in this rapidly changing world.
Precisely. We can't afford to just sit back and be passive observers. We need to be engaged. We need to ask tough questions. We need to demand transparency, and we need to hold those in power accountable.
I love that. It's not about shying away from complexity. It's about leaning in, asking the uncomfortable questions, and demanding better from the technologies that are shaping our world.
Exactly. And that brings us right back to your initial question about Palantir's future. Will they be the next SpaceX? Will they revolutionize industries and achieve that almost mythical level of success? Or will they become a cautionary tale? A reminder that technological prowess without a strong ethical foundation can have serious consequences.
I think you just highlighted the biggest takeaway for our listeners. The future of Palantir, much like the future of technology itself, it's not predetermined. It's being written right now in real time. And our actions, our choices, the questions we ask, they all play a role in shaping that future.
And that's incredibly powerful when you think about it. We're not just along for the ride in this technological revolution. We are active participants. The choices we make today, the questions we ask, the standards we demand, they will determine the course of technological advancement for generations to come.
Absolutely. So as we continue to explore this world of data, of algorithms, of the pursuit of technological dominance, let's remember that knowledge is power. But with great power comes great responsibility.
And that responsibility doesn't solely rest on the shoulders of the companies building these tools, but on all of us who use them, who interact with them, and who are ultimately impacted by them.
Couldn't have said it better myself. So let's move on to something we touched on briefly earlier, this whole idea of Palantir being an AI company. Is that a legitimate claim? Or is it more about clever marketing than technological reality? It seems like every tech company these days is trying to ride that AI wave, slapping AI powered on everything but the kitchen sink. So where does Palantir really stand in all of this? Are they actually pushing the boundaries of AI, or are they, just really good at refining those existing technologies and maybe amping up the marketing just a tad?
Well, it's a question that's sparked endless debates, hasn't it? I mean, tech analysts can't seem to get enough of it. And there's no doubt that Palantir does use AI and machine learning, right? We see it in some of their products or services. But the real heart of the matter is, are those technologies the driving force behind their success? Or are they more like enhancements, added bonuses on top of what they're already good at, which is, as we said, this incredible ability to process data?
So it's the difference between saying a car has anti-lock brakes and saying it's a self-driving car, right?
Yeah.
Both involve technology for sure, but the level of complexity and the potential impact they're in totally different leagues.
Exactly. A perfect analogy. And with Palantir, I'd say their real strength isn't about inventing mind-blowing AI. It's about the data itself. They have access to this incredible trove of information, massive amounts, unique data sets, often very sensitive stuff. Most companies wouldn't even know where to start with that. But Palantir, They've built their entire model, their entire approach around taking that data, making sense of it, and turning it into something useful.
Which brings us back again to those government contracts. It's like we're constantly being pulled back to this central gravitational force that seems to shape everything they do.
And there's a reason for that. It's not just about the money, although that's definitely a factor. Those contracts are the key to the most valuable asset in the information age, which is, you guessed it, data. It's that access, that proximity to power, to the intelligence world that really sets them apart. It's a different playing field, different rules.
It's like they've got an all-access backstage pass while everyone else is stuck out in the parking lot.
That access is incredibly valuable, but it also comes with its own risks, its own uncertainties. We've touched on things like political shifts, those ethical concerns, and of course the competition. But there's another layer to all of this that doesn't get talked about enough, the data itself. What happens if that data, the very thing that fuels Palantir's success, suddenly becomes, I don't know, restricted
Yeah.
or even disappears?
Okay, now that's a thought that'll keep you up at night. I mean, we talked about the potential for politics to change, for data privacy regulations to tighten, for the public to push back against this idea of mass data collection. But the idea that the data well could just, I don't know, dry up, that's a whole other level of risk.
And it's almost ironic, isn't it? They've built this incredible machine, this data crunching powerhouse. But at the end of the day, their success hinges on this constant flow of raw material, on that data. And they're at the mercy of forces that even their fancy algorithms might not be able to predict or control.
It's a good reminder that in data, just like in life, it's often the things we take for granted, abundance, easy access, even the rules of the game that can change most dramatically and have the biggest impact.
And that, I think, is the most important takeaway from our deep dive into the world of Palantir. They're a fascinating company doing some really cutting-edge work, but their story is also a reflection of the bigger picture, wouldn't you say? The power of data, the sometimes uncomfortable relationship between government and technology, and the big ethical questions that emerge when we start trusting algorithms to make decisions that impact our lives.
Absolutely. Palantir's journey is far from over, and it'll be, let's just say it'll be very interesting to see how they navigate the road ahead. Will they be a force for good in the world using their data to actually solve problems? Or will they become, well, a cautionary tale? Only time will tell. But that's a conversation for another deep dive, wouldn't you say?
Indeed it is. Until then, folks, stay informed, stay curious, and most importantly, keep asking those tough questions.
Couldn't agree more. A huge thank you to our expert for sharing his insights, and to our amazing listeners, thanks for joining us. This has been The Deep Dive, signing off.